Good Voyage Cathedral shone resplendently on that Saturday morning. The stained glass windows filtered the sunlight, creating a dazzling display of colors that danced over the elegantly dressed guests. Helen Vance caught her reflection one last time in the side-room mirror of the church, adjusting the French lace veil that completed her gown, designed by one of the nation's most renowned fashion designers. "You look beautiful, my daughter," said Sophia Vance, her mother, with an expression that Helen couldn't quite decipher. There was something beyond the typical maternal emotion of such moments, a shadow of worry that Sophia struggled, albeit unsuccessfully, to hide. Helen's cell phone buzzed again. It was the 10th message from Richard that morning, each one echoing the same anxious tone. "Are you okay? Are you almost there?" Helen quickly replied, trying to calm her fiancé. Ever since the previous night, when they'd shared a tense dinner with a few international investors, Richard had seemed especially nervous. "He's just anxious," Helen reassured herself as her makeup team put on the final touches. Yet deep down, that nagging feeling that had haunted her for weeks was intensifying. Little details that once seemed insignificant were slowly coalescing into a disturbing puzzle in her mind. The past few weeks had unfolded as a series of odd events: secret meetings at Richard's office, documents hastily concealed whenever she entered the room, and hushed, tense phone calls, all of which Helen had dismissed as the stress of wedding preparations and the high-stakes negotiations at Richard's company. Outside, the murmurs of the assembled crowd grew louder. The 600 guests were already seated, eagerly awaiting the grand moment. The crème de la crème of elite society, prominent businessmen and high-ranking politicians alike, had gathered to witness the union of two of Newport's most traditional families. "It's time," announced the master of ceremonies as he slightly opened the door. Helen's heart began to race. Her father, Anthony Vance, stepped forward to escort her to the altar. But before they could leave, Sophia gently grasped her daughter's arm. "Helen," she hesitated as if choosing her words with care. "You can still—" "Mom," Helen interrupted softly. "Everything's fine. It's just nerves." The bridal march started to play, and the main doors of the cathedral swung open. Helen took a deep breath and stepped forward. The aisle was strewn with white petals, and hundreds of eyes turned to watch her. At the altar, Richard awaited her, composed in an impeccable tuxedo. Yet even from afar, Helen noticed he was clenching, his hands tightly, a nervous tic she knew all too well when something troubled him. Then it happened. The sound of hooves striking the marble floor of the church thundered over the music. For a moment, Helen thought she was hallucinating. A majestic black horse, with a glossy coat and an air of regality, was striding down the central aisle as if it had been specially invited to the ceremony. Chaos erupted. Guests rose from their seats, some startled, others mesmerized. The security team hesitated, clearly unprepared to handle such an extraordinary intrusion. But what truly caught Helen's attention was Richard's reaction. His face had drained of color, and his hands trembled visibly. The horse halted beside Helen, and she noticed an envelope affixed to its saddle. With trembling fingers, she retrieved the document. The seal broke with ease, revealing pages that at first appeared purely bureaucratic. Yet as her eyes raced over the lines, Helen felt her world begin to collapse. It was a contract. Not just any contract, but a document proving that Richard had secretly negotiated shares in the Vance family business. His signature was there, alongside dates and figures that churned her stomach. In what felt like slow motion, she lifted her eyes to Richard, searching for an explanation, a denial, anything to dispel the surreal moment. Then a woman rose among the guests. Tall and elegant, with an air of someone who'd been waiting precisely for this moment, she advanced toward the altar. Her heels echoed on the marble as she walked. The smile on her face wasn't one of pleasure, but rather of justice being served. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from, and stay tuned. The silence in Good Voyage Cathedral was deafening. The mysterious woman stopped just a few steps from Richard, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made Helen shudder. There was a history in that gaze, a story that Helen was only beginning to realize she knew nothing about. "Hello, Richard," the woman said, her calm, controlled voice echoing throughout the church. "I thought this would be the perfect moment for us to meet again." Richard looked as if he were seeing a ghost. His face alternated between pallor and flushed, red while beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. "Marina," he stammered, "what are you doing here?" The name struck Helen like a blow. Marina. That name had surfaced in casual conversations more than once, always followed by abrupt changes of subject on Richard's part. Marina was his former business partner, the very one who had left his company abruptly 2 years ago without any public explanation. "I came bearing a wedding gift," Marina replied, gesturing toward the contract still clutched in Helen's hand. "I thought your fiancé deserved to know exactly who he's marrying." The photographer's flashes erupted incessantly, capturing every second of this surreal scene. The black horse remained impassive, a living statue silently witnessing the unfolding drama. Sophia Vance moved closer to her daughter, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "I tried to warn you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "There were so many signs." Memories began to flood back to Helen. The secret meetings, the mysterious phone calls, the hurriedly hidden documents, and the business trips that had multiplied over the past months. Richard's growing anxiety as the wedding approached. All the pieces were slowly fitting together into an image she never wanted to see. "The contract you're holding," Marina continued, now addressing Helen directly, "is only the tip of the iceberg. Richard has been planning this for months. The wedding was meant to be the icing on the cake, a way to secure his unrestricted access to the Vance empire." Richard finally snapped out of his stupor. "That's absurd," he exploded, his voice trembling. "Helen, my love, don't believe her. Marina is trying to get revenge because I pushed her out of the company. She's bitter, nothing more." But Helen could no longer hear his explanations. Her eyes were locked on Marina, whose unsettling calm only deepened the mystery. "Please continue," Helen requested, her voice firm and unexpected. Marina pulled a tablet from her bag and handed it to Helen. On its screen, a series of emails and documents revealed an elaborate corporate merger plan. Helen's name appeared in several of them, even though she had never authorized or been consulted about these negotiations. "He forged your signature on multiple documents," Marina explained. "Everything was set up so that after the wedding, control of the Vance companies would be gradually transferred to a holding company under his control." Anthony Vance, who had until then watched in stunned silence, stepped forward with measured steps. "How did you uncover all of this?" he demanded of Marina, his deep voice resonating through the church. "Because I was part of the plan from the beginning," Marina admitted, meeting his gaze steadily. "Richard convinced me it was merely a necessary corporate restructuring, but when I discovered the true extent of his intentions, I refused to participate. That's why I was forced out of the company." Murmurs spread among the guests as smartphones buzzed and updates were shared live on social media. What was supposed to be the wedding of the year had now transformed into the scandal of the decade. Helen looked down at her wedding dress, then around at the flowers decorating the church and the shocked expressions on the guests' faces. All that glitz and meticulously planned happiness was nothing more than a facade. Her fairy tale had turned into a nightmare, broadcast live for the entire nation to see. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from and stay tuned. "You mentioned other families," Helen addressed Marina, her voice resolutely calm. "I need to know everything." Marina nodded and swiped open a folder on her tablet. The Mendon family. 3 years ago, Richard approached the heiress, Teresa Mendon. The pattern was the same: a whirlwind romance, an extravagant engagement, and documents prepared behind the scenes. "Teresa Mendon," Sophia interrupted, eyes widening. "The young woman who mysteriously disappeared from society." "Not exactly disappeared," Marina corrected. "She uncovered everything a week before the wedding. She moved to Paris and rebuilt her life away from the spotlight. In fact, she contacted me when she saw your engagement announcement in the papers, Helen." The pieces were coming together like a macabre puzzle. Helen recalled seeing old photos of Richard with a sophisticated young woman at various social events, yet he always deftly changed the subject when she mentioned it. Helen's father, Anthony Vance, who had maintained a reserved demeanor until then, stepped toward Richard. His expression was one of chilling calm. "My daughter will no longer be just another conquest in your corporate exploits," he declared, exuding the authority of someone who commanded one of the nation's largest business empires. Richard struggled to maintain his composure, but his nervousness was unmistakable. "Mr. Vance, this is a misunderstanding. I can explain every document, every transaction. Marina is distorting the facts to damage me." At that moment, a second figure rose among the guests. It was Claire Mendon, Teresa's mother, whom Helen knew from elite social circles. Her face bore a mixture of pain and determination. "There's nothing to distort, Richard," Claire pronounced, her voice echoing throughout the church. "You nearly destroyed my family. If Teresa hadn't uncovered your plans in time—" The black horse, now known as Guardian, stood motionless near the altar and snorted again, as if affirming every revelation. Helen noticed something curious about the animal, a small white star-shaped mark on its forehead, partially hidden by its flowing mane. Marina continued, "Richard has followed a pattern over the years. He identifies traditional families at moments of generational transition, when wealth is about to pass to the heirs. He seduces them with romance, earns everyone's trust, and while the wedding is in motion, he prepares all the documents needed to seize control of their businesses." Helen recalled the numerous times Richard had shown an unusual interest in her family's business affairs, the seemingly casual questions about succession, his suggestions for modernizing management, and his sudden eagerness to join board meetings. "But why the horse?" someone murmured among the guests. Marina offered an enigmatic smile. "Ah, that's the interesting part of the story. The horse belonged to Teresa Mendon's grandfather, his most prized possession, an award-winning show stallion. When Teresa discovered Richard's schemes, the horse mysteriously vanished from the family stables. Richard convinced her to transfer ownership of the animal to one of his companies as a gesture of trust." A chill ran down Helen's spine. The animal before her couldn't possibly be the same. It would be an extraordinary coincidence. Yet there was something in Guardian's gaze, an ancient wisdom that seemed to observe and judge everything around it. Sophia moved closer, firmly grasping Helen's hands. "Helen, remember that conversation we had 3 months ago, when I found those strange documents in Richard's office?" Helen nodded slowly. Her mother had tried to alert her to the inconsistencies. In several contracts, but blinded by love, she had defended Richard fiercely. "Your mother began investigating," Marina revealed. "She was the one who connected the dots. Sophia reached out to me weeks ago, but we needed concrete evidence before taking any action." The revelation struck Helen like lightning. Her own mother, always so discreet and seemingly compliant with social conventions, had been the first to suspect and act. All of Richard's recent nervousness, the mysterious calls and his erratic behavior now pointed to one undeniable conclusion. He knew he was under investigation. At the back of the church, the two cameramen exchanged knowing glances. They weren't merely hired professionals documenting a wedding. They were part of an investigative team that had been tracking Richard's every move for months. The morning sun continued to stream through the stained glass of Good Voyage Cathedral, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that danced over the assembly. What was meant to be a celebration of love had transformed into a moment of revelation and corporate justice. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from and stay tuned. The atmosphere inside the cathedral swung between tension and disbelief. Social media was exploding with real-time updates, turning what should have been the wedding of the year into a viral sensation. Hashtags like WeddingGate and Warrior Bride were already dominating the trending topics. Cornered by the mounting evidence, Richard began to reveal a side of himself that Helen had never seen before. His aristocratic face, usually so composed and charming, twisted into a mask of arrogance and despair. "You don't understand," he roared, his tone shifting abruptly. "I was modernizing these companies. I was liberating them from traditional families who don't know how to manage fortunes in the 21st century. Marina stepped forward, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Modernization? Is that what you told Teresa as well? Or Caroline? Pepper before her? A murmur of surprise rippled through the church. Caroline Pepper was a well-known name in the business world, the young executive who had suffered a nervous breakdown 5 years ago and completely withdrawn from public life. 3 women, Marina continued, her voice heavy with controlled indignation. 3 heiresses of corporate empires, 3 stories that might have ended like yours is about to, Helen, but today we break the cycle. Helen absorbed every word with a clarity that both frightened and empowered her. Every moment of the past 2 years with Richard, the sudden trips, the late-night calls, the secret meetings, now revealed themselves as pieces of an elaborate scheme of manipulation. Sophia Vance snatched the tablet from Marina's hands and began projecting documents and photos onto a large screen that had been set up to display the couple's romantic moments. Instead of rehearsal photos, the guests now watched, wide-eyed, as meticulously organized evidence was unveiled. Every contract, every transfer, every move was documented, Sophia explained, taking command of the situation with surprising authority. Richard never anticipated one thing: the strength of the women he tried to manipulate. For the first time since delivering the envelope, Guardian moved, a steady, measured approach toward Helen, as if offering silent support. Its deep, knowing eyes seemed to hold the wisdom of the ages. "That weekend at the Mendon stables," Helen murmured, a long-forgotten memory surfacing. "You insisted we go, Richard. It was to assess their assets, wasn't it?" Richard remained silent, his quietude more telling than any words could be. The photographers continued to document every expression, every gesture. The scandal was reaching epic proportions. Then, unexpectedly, Teresa Mendon, whom everyone had assumed was living in Paris, appeared via video call on the screen. Her image, elegant and serene, stirred deep emotion among the assembled guests. "Helen," Teresa began, her voice transmitted clearly through the church's speakers, "when I heard about your engagement to Richard, I vowed I wouldn't let another woman endure what I did. Guardian, the horse with you, was my family's most prized treasure. Richard used it as a symbol of his power over us. Today it stands for something greater, to bring the truth to light." A surge of gratitude welled up in Helen for these women, Marina, Teresa, and even her own mother, who had united to prevent her from making the gravest mistake of her life. The sun now shone high, its rays piercing through the stained glass with renewed intensity. The dancing colors seemed to signal the end of an era of shadows and the dawn of something new. Anthony Vance stepped closer to his daughter, gently lifting the veil from her face. "You don't have to be a bride today," he said softly, "but you can be a leader tomorrow." Helen looked at her wedding dress, the guests, and at Richard, who now appeared diminutive and insignificant in light of the overwhelming truth. A decision crystallized within her. This apparent tragedy would become a manifesto of female power and corporate justice. The silence in Good Voyage Cathedral was shattered by the sound of Helen's heels echoing down the altar steps. Each step resonated with determination throughout the sacred space, marking not an ending but a beginning. Her wedding dress, once a symbol of a romantic fairy tale, had transformed into an armor of strength and rebirth. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her clear, firm voice filling every corner of the church, "today you came to witness a union, and you will witness one, but not the union you expected." Every eye was fixed on her. Cameras captured every moment as the event was broadcast live to thousands of viewers following this extraordinary unfolding. "The union we celebrate today," Helen continued, "is between truth and justice, between power and responsibility, between the past and the future of American business empires." Marina stepped forward, carrying a folder of documents. "Helen, there is something you need to see," she said, handing over the papers. "While investigating Richard, we discovered that your father, Anthony, had long suspected something was amiss. He had been secretly safeguarding the company's assets." Anthony Vance smiled discreetly. "Never underestimate a father who loves his daughter," he said, placing a reassuring hand on Helen's shoulder, "or a businessman who understands the value of caution." On the screen, Teresa Menden remained visible via video call, now joined by Caroline Pepper. The two, women who had escaped Richard's clutches, watched intently as the moment of redemption unfolded. "When Richard began courting our family," Helen revealed as she strode down the central aisle, "he didn't know he was about to face something far bigger than his usual schemes. He never counted on the network of strong women forming around him." Guardian, the black stallion, followed Helen's movements like a protective shadow. Its majestic presence added an almost mystical quality to this historic moment. Sophia Vance rose and joined her daughter. "For months, we've built a protective network, businesswomen, attorneys, executives, all united by a common purpose. It wasn't just about stopping a wedding. It was about transforming the way corporate power is exercised in our country." Richard, who had remained silent until now, attempted to edge toward the exit, but was swiftly restrained by security. His empire of manipulation was crumbling before his eyes. "The Vance companies," Helen announced, her voice resolute, "will undergo a transformation. Effective immediately, we will implement a board of directors composed predominantly of women, with representatives spanning different generations and backgrounds." Marina smiled and added, "And that's not all. We are establishing the Business Guardians Foundation, dedicated to protecting and mentoring heiresses and businesswomen against corporate manipulation." The guests, initially shocked by the revelations, now exhibited varied reactions. Some applauded, others whispered excitedly, and several businessmen shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "What you witnessed today," Helen continued, "is not the end of a love story, but the birth of a revolution in American business. A silent revolution built behind the scenes by extraordinary women." Teresa, via the video screen, added, "And Guardian, my horse that Richard once used as a symbol of his power, now becomes the emblem of this transformation. He will remain with the Foundation as a constant reminder of our strength and unity." Guardian snorted softly, as if acknowledging his new role. The sunlight streaming through the stained glass cast vibrant colors on his sleek black coat, highlighting the small white star on his forehead. "While you expected a traditional I do at the altar," Helen declared, "I say yes to a new era of corporate leadership, an era of transparency, collaboration, and female empowerment." Photographers captured every frenetic moment, aware that they were not merely documenting a social scandal, but a historic turning point in American business. Social media exploded with comments and shares, turning that Saturday morning into a landmark moment of female empowerment in the corporate world. Good Voyage Cathedral, having witnessed countless unions over its long history, now bore witness to a very different celebration. What began as a traditional wedding had transformed into a moment of quiet revolution in the business world. Still, clad in her wedding dress, Helen ascended the altar steps once more. This time not as a bride about to marry, but as an emerging leader ready to make history. "Before we conclude this historic moment," she announced, "I have some important declarations to make." Sophia and Marina positioned themselves by her side while on the screen. Teresa and Caroline served as virtual witnesses to this transformative event. The Business Guardians Foundation is established today with an initial fund of $50 million, Helen revealed. This fund has been donated by businesswomen and executives who understand the importance of protecting the future of our companies. This is only the beginning. Richard, who had watched with a mixture of anger and disbelief, finally found his voice. "You can't do this. I have contracts. I have rights." "Your contracts," Marina interjected, "are already under review by our legal team. Every fraudulent document and every act of manipulation will be exposed and dealt with in court." Guardian approached the altar once more. Helen gently stroked his neck, feeling an intense connection with the animal that had become a symbol of her liberation. "From today onward," she continued, "the Vance companies will also implement a mentorship program for young executives. We won't just protect our heiresses, we'll nurture a new generation of corporate leaders." Anthony Vance stepped forward once again, his eyes gleaming with pride. "And I have an announcement of my own," he declared, his deep voice echoing through the church. "Effective immediately, Helen is officially taking over as president of the Vance Group." A murmur of surprise rippled through the cathedral. The woman who was once merely a bride now emerged as one of the most powerful executives in the country. Power need not be wielded through manipulation and deceit, Helen declared, her gaze sweeping over the assembled guests. It can, and must be built on the foundations of competence, collaboration, and transparency. Marina stepped up to the microphone. And to ensure that stories like ours never repeat, the Foundation will create a shared database among companies to alert against any attempts at fraud or corporate manipulation. Social media exploded. The hashtag #GuardianRevolution quickly soared to the top of the trending lists nationwide. Journalists on site broadcasted every development live, marking that morning as a historic milestone. Teresa, through the video screen, delivered her final message. Guardian will remain a living symbol of our unity and strength. May his presence forever remind us that we can transform our stories of pain into power. In a final symbolic gesture, Helen completely removed her bridal veil, letting it fall gracefully onto the altar steps. That simple act carried the weight of an era ending and a new, more powerful one beginning. Today, she concluded, her voice filled with emotion and determination, we are not celebrating a wedding, but the birth of a new era in American business, an era in which female power will no longer be underestimated or manipulated, but respected and celebrated. The sun, now high in the sky, bathed Good Voyage Cathedral in its most brilliant light, casting a radiant spectacle through the stained glass. Guardian neighed one last time, as if sealing this historic moment with his mystical approval. And to you, Richard, Helen said, turning toward her stunned ex-fiancé, thank you for inadvertently uniting us. Your attempt at manipulation has sparked a transformation far greater than any of us could have imagined. The guests rose in a spontaneous ovation. Camera flashes erupted as every angle of this historic moment was captured. What began as a scandal was transforming into a resounding manifesto of power and transformation. Dear viewers, the story you have just witnessed is not merely about a wedding that never took place. It's about the birth of a new era in American business. To follow more inspiring stories of transformation and empowerment, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell icon, and leave your comments on this silent revolution. Share this message of strength and unity. Together we are stronger, and every story shared plants a seed of change. Until next time.